The blue glow from 6 monitors cast shadows across Robert Hayes's weathered face. His hands, steady hands that had wired 1,000 homes over 40 years, trembled now as he dragged the playback slider back to 10:47 a.m. Saturday morning, his living room, empty except for 2 people who thought they were alone. He pressed play for the 3rd time. Victoria's voice came through crystal clear, that smooth tone she used when discussing dinner plans or weekend errands. Tuesday night, 9 p.m., the basement stairs. Make it look like he tripped carrying tools. Danny's response was quieter, reluctant. And you're sure about the timing? He always goes down there after dinner, creature of habit. It'll be quick, painless. Then we call 911, play the devastated family. Bob's finger hovered over the pause button. His son, his boy, planning his murder like it was a home improvement project. He checked the timestamp on the recording. Saturday, October 19th, 10:47 a.m. Then he checked his watch. Sunday, October 20th, 11:43 p.m. Less than 22 hours until they planned to kill him. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so goddamn tragic. For 3 weeks, his security system had been dead, fried by lightning during that Columbus Day storm. He'd finally fixed it Friday afternoon, spent 4 hours rewiring circuits and upgrading the microphones. The cameras were better than ever, picking up conversations from across the house. He'd meant to tell Danny and Victoria that night at dinner, meant to say, "Hey kids, got the system back online, clearer than before." But Mrs. Hughes next door had called in a panic, burst pipe, basement flooding, and by the time he'd helped her, by the time he'd come back inside, they were already leaving. The thought had slipped his mind entirely. That forgotten announcement had just saved his life. "I don't know what to do, Maggie," he whispered to the photograph. "He's our boy. He's all we got." But Margaret's smile offered no answers, and the clock was ticking. Bob returned to the monitors, pulled out a legal pad, and started writing. 40 years of troubleshooting electrical problems had taught him one essential truth: understand the system before you touch a single wire. Time to understand what the hell his son had gotten into. The October sun hung low over Cleveland, casting long shadows across Bob's driveway as he tightened the last connection on Mrs. Hughes's porch light. Eleanor Hughes stood on her front step, arms crossed against the autumn chill, watching with the kind of grateful attention that made Bob miss having someone to fix things for. "You're a lifesaver, Bob," she said as the light flickered on. "Harold always handled these things. I swear, every time something breaks, I remember how helpless I am." "You're not helpless, Eleanor. You're just not an electrician." Bob climbed down from his ladder, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Besides, what are neighbors for?" "Well, I made extra lasagna if you want to take some home. I know you're expecting Danny and that lovely wife of his tonight, but you could have it for leftovers." Bob smiled. "I'll never say no to your lasagna." Back in his own house, Bob moved through the familiar rhythms of Friday preparation. He'd been doing these weekly dinners with Danny for 8 months now, ever since his son had moved back to Cleveland. "Just temporary, Dad, until I land something good." The job market for project managers was tough, Danny said. The monthly $700 Bob sent helped with rent, groceries, keeping things afloat. It was the least he could do. After Margaret died, Danny had driven up from Columbus every weekend for 6 months. They'd grieved together, father and son, learning how to live in a house that felt too empty. When Danny's own life fell apart, the layoff, the breakup with that girl from his MBA program, it felt natural to help. That's what family did. The kitchen smelled like pot roast and rosemary when Bob heard Danny's car in the driveway. 6 o'clock exactly. His son had always been punctual. "Dad," Danny's voice carried that forced cheerfulness Bob had been noticing lately, a brightness that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was thinner than last month, his button-down shirt hanging loose on his frame. Bob pulled him into a hug. "Hey, kiddo, you eating enough?" Yeah, I'm fine. Just been hitting the gym." But Danny's shoulder blades felt sharp under Bob's hands. Victoria followed him inside, her heels clicking on the hard wood. She was put together as always, Dark hair pulled back, makeup perfect, that smile that showed all her teeth. Bob, something smells incredible. Just Margaret's pot roast recipe, nothing fancy. You're too modest. She kissed his cheek, and her lips felt cold despite the warmth inside. A man your age, still cooking these elaborate meals. Most people would just order takeout. Most people didn't promise their wife they'd keep her recipes alive. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Annoyance? Calculation? But it vanished so quickly Bob thought he'd imagined it. Over dinner, Bob asked the usual questions. How's the job search? Any leads? What about that interview with the consulting firm? Danny's answers came slowly, eyes fixed on his plate. Market's rough right now, Dad. Lots of qualified people competing for the same positions. But you've got the experience. 7 years at Morrison & Associates before the layoff. That counts for something. It's been almost a year since Morrison. Gaps look bad on resumes. Danny's fingers drummed against his water glass, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. Victoria's hand covered Danny's, stilling the motion. He's doing his best. We both are. Your support has been invaluable, Bob. That $700 a month? It's the difference between making rent and, well, desperation. The way she said it made Bob's skin prickle, like she was assessing, calculating, determining the exact value of his generosity. I wish I could do more, Bob said, meaning it. If you kids need extra— No, you've done plenty. Victoria cut him off smoothly. Actually, speaking of finances, have you thought about updating your estate planning? These things are so important as we get older, making sure everything's organized, your wishes are clear. Bob set down his fork. My will's been updated. Everything goes to Danny naturally. House, savings, life insurance. Sarah Mitchell helped me sort it all out after Margaret passed. Sarah Mitchell? Victoria's eyes sharpened with interest. My attorney handles all my legal stuff. Why? Oh, no reason. Just good to know you're being responsible about these things. She took a sip of wine. And your life insurance, that's still current? $250,000 policy through Northwestern Mutual. Been paying into it for 30 years. Victoria nodded slowly, like she was filing information away. That's wonderful. Very responsible. What about your security system? I noticed some of the cameras looked old last time we were here. Bob almost mentioned the storm damage, almost said the system had been down for weeks. But Danny interrupted. Vicky, can we not talk about Dad's security? It's weird. I'm just concerned for his safety. This is a big house for one person. What if something happened? Nothing's going to happen, Bob said firmly. I've lived here for 30 years, know every neighbor on this street. Cleveland's not the crime capital people make it out to be. His phone buzzed. Eleanor Hughes's name lit up the screen. Sorry, folks. Let me take this. Bob stepped into the hallway. Eleanor, what's wrong? Bob, I'm so sorry to bother you during dinner, but my basement, there's water everywhere. I think a pipe burst and I don't know how to turn off the water main, and Harold always handled— I'll be right there. Don't worry. When he returned to the dining room, Danny and Victoria were already standing, gathering their coats. Emergency next door, Bob explained. Eleanor's got a flooding situation. We should go anyway, Victoria said quickly. Let you handle that. Sounds serious. You sure? I might be a while, but you could stay, have dessert. No, we'll get out of your way. She was already moving toward the door, Danny trailing behind her. Bob walked them out. As Victoria slid into the passenger seat, she called back. Sleep well, Bob. See you soon. There was something in her tone, something Bob couldn't quite place, that stayed with him as he hurried to Eleanor's house. He spent 3 hours dealing with the burst pipe, then another hour calming Eleanor down, making sure she knew how to spot water damage, promising to check on her tomorrow. By the time he got home, it was past 10. He was exhausted, covered in basement grime, and had completely forgotten about mentioning the security cameras. Tomorrow, he thought. I'll call Danny tomorrow, tell him the system's back up and running, but tomorrow would bring its own surprises. Saturday morning arrived cold and clear, the kind of October day that made Cleveland almost beautiful. Bob woke at 6 out of habit. 40 years of early job sites had trained his body to reject sleeping in. By 7, he was in his workshop with fresh coffee, ready to do a comprehensive test of the security system. This was his pride and joy, this system. He designed it himself, installed every camera, run every wire. 8 HD cameras covering all entry points, plus interior coverage of the main living areas, motion sensors, audio pickup sensitive enough to catch conversations across rooms. Everything backed up to 3 separate cloud services because Bob Hayes didn't believe in single points of failure. The storm had been catastrophic. Lightning strike took out the main circuit board and fried half the wiring. But he'd rebuilt it better than before, upgraded the audio processors, added a monitoring station here in the workshop where he could watch every feed simultaneously. He pulled up the test interface, checked each camera feed. Living room, clear. Kitchen, clear. Front entrance, clear. Basement stairs, clear. Perfect. Bob was adjusting the sensitivity on the front door camera when he heard a sound that shouldn't exist, a key turning in his lock. He glanced at the monitor. 10:15 a.m. Danny's car pulling up to the curb, Danny and Victoria walking up the driveway. He reached for the intercom to say hello. They must have forgotten something last night, but something stopped him. The way they were looking around, cautious, furtive. They entered the house like burglars, even though they had every right to be there. Bob's finger hovered over the intercom button. Then Victoria spoke, her voice coming through perfectly on the workshop speakers. Good. He's not here. Bob's hand froze. Danny's voice, nervous. How do you know? His car's gone from the garage. Saturday mornings he's always at Eleanor's house, helping with chores or fixing something. We've got at least an hour, maybe 2 if she's really got him working. Bob looked at his car keys hanging on the workshop hook. His car was in the garage, the interior garage, not visible from the street. They thought he was gone. They thought they were alone. Vicky, this still feels wrong, Danny said. Going through his personal stuff, we need to know exactly where everything is. The will, insurance policies, property deed, bank statements. Tuesday night we won't have time for treasure hunts. The coffee cup slipped from Bob's hand. It didn't break, landed on the carpet, but coffee spread across the floor like spilled blood. Tuesday night, going through his stuff, treasure hunts. On the monitor, Bob watched Victoria open his filing cabinet. She knew exactly where it was, exactly which drawer. She pulled out folders with practiced efficiency. Life insurance, $250,000 from Northwestern Mutual. Beneficiary, Daniel Hayes. She held up the policy. House equity based on last assessment, $580,000. Savings account at Huntington Bank, $95,000. Total liquid assets just under $1 million. Danny made a sound like he was being strangled. Jesus Christ, Vicky, don't Jesus me. Victoria's voice turned sharp, nothing like the warm daughter-in-law tone Bob knew. You're $63,000 in the hole to Johnny Rizzo's crew. Your deadline is Wednesday morning. They're not going to break your legs, Danny. They're going to kill you. Do you understand that? They're going to put a bullet in your head and dump you in Lake Erie. Bob's vision tunneled. Gambling debts, death threats, and the solution they'd chosen was Tuesday night, 9 p.m., Victoria continued, spreading documents across Bob's coffee table like a general planning a campaign. The basement stairs. He always goes down there after dinner, carries that heavy toolbox. Old wood stairs, poor lighting, cluttered with equipment. A fall would be completely believable for a man his age who insists on doing everything himself. What if someone investigates? Danny's voice was barely audible. They won't. He's 65, lives alone, does his own repairs in a cluttered basement. Accidental falls are the second leading cause of death for men his age. The medical examiner will sign off without blinking. She paused. And even if they do look closer, what will they find? A grieving son who came for weekly dinners? A devoted daughter-in-law who worried about his safety? We're in the will already. No financial motive that looks suspicious. Bob couldn't breathe. His chest felt like someone was standing on it. This wasn't some theoretical discussion. This wasn't dark humor or frustration venting. This was a plan. A detailed, calculated plan to murder him in his own home. On screen, Danny sank onto Bob's couch, head in his hands. There has to be another way. There isn't. Victoria stood over him. I've thought through every angle. Your father dies in an accident Tuesday night. Wednesday morning, Johnny Rizzo's goons show up for their money, and we tell them you'll have it within 48 hours once the insurance company processes the claim. They'll wait. They want their money more than they want your corpse. And if they don't wait, then we're both dead. She grabbed Danny's face, forced him to look at her. This is survival, baby. Him or us. Choose. The silence stretched. Bob watched his son, the boy he'd raised, the man he'd supported through every failure, every setback, slowly nod his head. Okay, Danny whispered. Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Victoria smiled. Good. Now let's make sure we know where everything is. We'll need the death certificate filed by Thursday, insurance claim started by Friday. I'll handle the funeral arrangements. You play the devastated son. By next month, we'll have the payout. By Christmas, we'll be out of Ohio starting fresh. They spent another 20 minutes going through Bob's files. Victoria took photos of documents with her phone. They discussed which funeral home to use, what kind of service Bob would have wanted, whether to cremate or bury, planning his death like it was a wedding. Finally, they left. Bob watched them drive away on the monitor, Victoria's hand on Danny's thigh, her mouth moving, probably reassuring him, strengthening his resolve. Bob sat in the silence of his workshop, surrounded by the tools that had built his life, staring at the screens that had just revealed his death sentence. 48 hours. He had 48 hours to decide, confront them and risk accelerating their timeline, or stay silent and become a victim. Or, and this thought crystallized slowly, carefully, he could do what he'd done for 40 years. Understand the system, identify the problem, fix it. Bob pulled out his phone and started making a list. 1. Copy all recordings to multiple secure locations. 2. Research. Victoria Lawson, who is she really? 3. Find out about Danny's gambling debts. Are they real? 4. Contact attorney Sarah Mitchell. 5. Document everything. His hands weren't shaking anymore. The initial shock had burned away, leaving behind something harder, colder. They thought he was just a lonely old man, easy prey, too trusting to see the predator in his living room. They were about to learn that some prey had teeth. Bob checked the time, 11:47 a.m. Saturday. The countdown had begun. Bob didn't sleep Saturday night. By 5 Sunday morning, he was back in the workshop, re-watching footage with the detachment of a crime scene investigator. Emotion wouldn't help. He needed facts. The second viewing revealed what he'd missed in his initial shock. At 10:23 a.m., 6 minutes before discussing his murder, Victoria had stood near the window, phone pressed to her ear. Bob rewound, enhanced the audio. Her voice came through faint but clear. Yeah, it's me. Tuesday night, confirmed. No complications expected. Same approach as the Michigan job. I'll call you Thursday once it's done. Michigan job. Bob's fingers flew across the keyboard. He Googled. Suspicious death, Michigan elderly man 2024. The results made his stomach drop. Flint Journal, April 3, 2024. Local man, 68, dies in tragic home accident. Gerald Thompson, longtime Flint resident, found dead at bottom of basement stairs. Recently married healthcare aide Veronica Lewis, death ruled accidental. Lewis inherited estate valued at approximately $400,000. Bob clicked another article. The widow had disappeared shortly after the funeral. Family members raised questions. No investigation followed. Veronica Lewis, Victoria Lawson. He searched deeper. Toledo suspicious death elderly 2021. Toledo Blade, September 2021. Mystery surrounds death of retired teacher. Harold Pemberton, 71, died of apparent electrocution in home workshop. Girlfriend Valerie Cross inherited estate. Cross vanished after funeral. Workshop electrocution, exactly what Victoria had mentioned as her backup plan. Bob's hands shook as he printed the articles. 2 deaths, possibly 3 if he didn't stop this. Different names, different cities, same pattern. Victoria had done this before. He checked his watch, 7:15 a.m. He needed professional help immediately. Sarah Mitchell answered on the second ring despite it being Sunday morning. Sarah, it's Bob Hayes. I need to see you right now. My son is planning to murder me in 36 hours, and I have proof. 30 minutes later, Bob sat in Sarah's home office in Shaker Heights. Early morning sun streamed through windows as she listened to the recordings, her expression hardening with each word. When the playback ended, Sarah leaned back, fingers steepled. Bob, this is conspiracy to commit murder, clearly documented, but we need to be strategic. She met his eyes. If you call police now, they lawyer up, claim it was dark humor or stress talking. Good attorneys could argue you misunderstood. Conspiracy is hard to prove without an actual attempt. So I have to let them try? No. We let them think they're going to, then document the actual attempt. That's attempted murder, ironclad. She was already typing. But first, 3 things immediately. Sarah counted on her fingers. 1. Medical evaluation today. If they're planning this, they might claim you're mentally incompetent. We need Dr. Patricia Reynolds to document your sound mind. 2. Financial protection. We freeze everything. They can't access your assets regardless of what happens. 3. Police coordination. I know Detective James Porter, Elder Crimes Unit. We brief him, prepare for Tuesday, catch them in the act. Bob's throat tightened. What about Danny? The gambling debts, the coercion? Even under duress, he made a choice. He could have come to you, declared bankruptcy, gone to police. Sarah's voice softened. If he cooperates and testifies, that matters for sentencing. But Bob, he chose to participate in planning your murder. That can't be excused, only mitigated. The words landed like physical blows. Bob pulled out his phone, showed her the Michigan and Toledo articles. Sarah's eyes widened. Jesus, this isn't opportunistic. This is a pattern predator. She grabbed her phone. I'm calling Porter now. This changes everything. Detective James Porter looked carved from old leather, mid-50s, weathered face, eyes that had seen humanity's worst. He arrived at Sarah's office within 2 hours, coffee in hand, expression grim. Play the recordings, he said. Bob played Saturday's footage, then the isolated phone call. Same approach as the Michigan job. Porter's body went rigid. Stop. Play that again. Bob replayed it 3 times. Porter pulled out his phone, played an audio file. A woman's voice, frantic. Please help. My husband fell down the stairs. He's not breathing. That's the 911 call from Veronica Lewis, Porter said. Gerald Thompson's widow. Flint, Michigan, April 2nd. He looked at Bob. Play yours again. Bob played Victoria's calm, calculated voice. Porter closed his eyes, listening. It's her. Same underlying voice, different performance. I'd stake my badge on it. He pulled out a worn folder, spread photographs across Sarah's desk. 7 suspicious deaths across the Midwest, last 8 years. Elderly men, financially comfortable, died in accidents shortly after marrying or getting involved with younger women. The women inherit and vanish. Porter pointed to each photo. Harold Pemberton, Toledo, 2021. Electrocution. Girlfriend Valerie Cross disappeared. Gerald Thompson, Flint, 2024. Basement stairs. Wife Veronica Lewis left the state. Martin Reeves, Indianapolis, 2022. House fire. Girlfriend Vanessa Lane inherited, can't be located. Same woman? Bob asked. We think so. Different jurisdictions, ruled accidental locally, never had evidence to prove connection. No fingerprints, no DNA. The women established themselves as caregivers, concerned partners. Perfect cover. Porter leaned forward. But you've got her on tape, not just planning but referencing previous jobs. That's pattern evidence we can use across multiple cases. How many has she killed? Bob's voice was barely audible. That we know of? 7, but I suspect more. She's been doing this at least a decade. Porter's expression turned hard. Gerald Thompson's family pushed for investigation. Michigan State Police opened a file, but Veronica vanished before they could question her, until now. Now she's documented, Sarah said. This could break the whole case. Porter nodded. If we play this right, Tuesday night we catch her in the act. But Bob, this woman is smart, experienced, dangerous. She's evaded law enforcement across multiple states. One wrong move, she disappears again. What about Danny's gambling debt? Bob asked. Johnny Rizzo? Porter typed on his phone. JR Holdings LLC here. Shell company registered to Thomas Brennan, Akron. Brennan has priors, fraud, extortion, loan sharking. He showed Bob a photo of a heavy-set man with dead eyes. Brennan works with Victoria? Sarah asked. My guess? She has a network. Brennan creates debt traps, loans money, gets targets hooked on gambling, manufactures crises. Victoria offers the deadly solution. They've probably worked together for years. Bob felt sick. Danny's debt might not even be real. Oh, it's real now. They lend actual money, create genuine pressure. But it's manufactured, controlled. They target families with assets, find the weak link, Danny, and exploit it. Porter closed his folder. Your son made bad choices, but he was chosen and manipulated by professionals. That matters for sentencing. Will he go to prison? Probably. Conspiracy to commit murder carries serious time, but with cooperation, testimony, genuine remorse? Porter shrugged. 5 to 8 years instead of 20. 5 to 8 years. Bob's son in prison, but alive. Tuesday night, Porter continued, you'll be wired. Tactical teams positioned around your property. The moment they make a threatening move, we breach. You press the panic button on your watch, we're there in seconds. What if something goes wrong? Nothing will go wrong. I've done this 23 years. Porter's voice was firm. Snipers, SWAT, EMTs on standby. You'll be safe. After leaving Sarah's office, Bob drove to Lakeview Cemetery. He hadn't visited Margaret's grave in months, too painful. But today he needed her. The October wind cut through his jacket as he stood over her headstone. Hey, Maggie, he said to the cold granite. Danny's in real trouble, and I don't know if it's my fault. No answer. Just wind and leaves. There's this woman, Victoria. She's got him convinced the only way out is to kill me. Bob's voice cracked. Our boy. The kid who cried when we put Rex down. He's planning to push me down the basement stairs. Bob sank to his knees on the wet grass. I know what you'd say. Save him, Bob, whatever it takes, but I don't know if there's anything left to save. He sat until the cold seeped through his jeans, until numbness returned. When he finally stood, he touched her headstone. I'm going to stop her. And maybe I can still save Danny. Somehow. Monday crawled. Bob maintained his routine, coffee, yard work, fixing Mrs. Hughes's garbage disposal. Normal, predictable. The creature of habit Victoria was counting on. At 4 p.m., he attended the tactical briefing at Cleveland PD. Commander Lisa Rodriguez ran it. Maps covered whiteboards, photos of his house from multiple angles, tactical diagrams showing entry points. Mr. Hayes, I want you to understand our protection plan, she pointed to the map. Sniper positions here and here, clear sightlines to your basement and back entrance, plainclothes officers in unmarked vans positioned for immediate response. SWAT staged 3 blocks away, 60 seconds to breach on my signal. Rodriguez looked at him directly. The moment either of them makes a threatening move, we intervene. You will not be harmed. That's my promise. Porter added, audio and video transmitters. We'll see and hear everything. Panic button links to Commander Rodriguez. One press, everyone moves. What about after arrest? Bob asked. Warrants ready for Victoria Lawson and her known aliases. Multi-state murder conspiracy, fraud, elder abuse, no bail. Porter's smile was grim. Once she's in custody, we flip Brennan and her network. This organization ends tomorrow night. 23 hours, Mr. Hayes, Rodriguez said. Get rest. We've got your back. Bob spent Monday evening backing up recordings to multiple cloud services. Redundancy saved lives. At 11 p.m., his doorbell rang. On the monitor, Danny, alone, looking wrecked. Bob opened the door. Danny, what are you doing here? His son looked terrible, red eyes disheveled, smelling of alcohol. Can I come in? Danny collapsed onto the couch, head in hands. Dad, I've made terrible mistakes. The gambling, the debts, lying about everything. I'm in deep. $63,000 to people who'll kill me if I don't pay by Wednesday. Come to police with me. We'll figure it out. Danny laughed bitterly. Too late. I've already done things, said things, made promises I can't take back. He stood, swaying. I just wanted to see you, tell you I'm sorry for being such a disappointment. You're not. Yes, I am. Mom would be ashamed. Danny moved toward the door. I love you, Dad. Whatever happens, remember that. Then he was gone, leaving Bob standing alone, wondering if that was confession, warning, or goodbye. He checked the time, 11:34 p.m., Monday. In 18 hours and 26 minutes, someone would try to kill him. Bob climbed the stairs, knowing he wouldn't sleep. The countdown was almost over. Tuesday arrived with the kind of clarity that comes before a storm. Bob woke at 5 a.m., not from an alarm, but from adrenaline. He'd managed maybe 2 hours of sleep, his mind cycling through scenarios, contingencies, things that could go wrong. By 7, Detective Porter arrived to install the wire. They worked in Bob's workshop, door locked, blinds drawn. Audio transmitter here, Porter said, taping a device the size of a quarter to Bob's chest. Video camera in your shirt button, both broadcast to our command van. Battery life is 8 hours, more than enough. He handed Bob a watch with a red button on the side. Panic button. One press sends immediate distress signal. Commander Rodriguez moves the moment she gets it. Bob slipped the watch on. It felt heavy, foreign. What if they search me? They won't. You're in your own home. They have no reason to suspect surveillance. Porter met his eyes. But if they do, if anything feels wrong, you press that button. Don't hesitate. Don't try to be a hero. I'm 65 years old. Hero ship left the station decades ago. Porter smiled grimly. You'd be surprised what people find in themselves when survival is on the line. He packed up his equipment. Teams are positioning now. Snipers on the Johnson's roof and Kramer's garage. Plainclothes units on Pine Street and Oakwood. SWAT at the community center. We'll be invisible, but we'll be everywhere. After Porter left, Bob spent the day in mechanical routine. Made his bed with hospital corners, the way he'd done for 40 years. Vacuumed the living room. Prepped ingredients for pot roast, Margaret's recipe, the one Danny had loved since childhood. The irony wasn't lost on him. Cooking his son's favorite meal for what was supposed to be his last dinner. At 3 p.m., his phone buzzed. Sarah Mitchell. All legal protections in place. Your assets are locked. They can't access anything regardless of outcome. You're protected. At 4 p.m., Commander Rodriguez. All units in position. We have eyes on your house. You're not alone. At 5 p.m., Mrs. Hughes knocked on his door with a plate of cookies. For after dinner, dear. You seemed so tired yesterday. Thought you could use something sweet. Bob almost broke then. This woman, this kind neighbor who'd never asked for anything except a helping hand with repairs, had no idea what was about to happen in the house next door. Thank you, Eleanor. You're a good friend. We take care of each other, don't we? She patted his arm. That's what Harold always said. Eleanor, in this world, all we've got is each other. After she left, Bob stood at his kitchen window, watching the sun drop toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, hidden in shadows and rooftops and unmarked vans, a small army waited to save his life, and somewhere across town, his son and a serial killer were preparing to take it. They arrived at 6 sharp. Bob watched on his workshop monitor as Danny's car pulled into the driveway. Danny got out first, moving slowly, carrying flowers. White lilies, funeral flowers, Bob realized with a chill. Victoria emerged looking perfect as always, but there was something different in her posture. Confidence, anticipation. Tonight was her night. Bob met them at the door, forcing normalcy into his voice. Hey kids, right on time. Danny couldn't meet his eyes. Hey, Dad. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been crying or screaming or both. Victoria kissed Bob's cheek, her lips cold. Something smells wonderful. Your pot roast? Margaret's recipe, Danny's favorite, was my favorite, Danny said quietly, then caught himself. Is my favorite. They moved into the dining room. Bob had set the table with Margaret's good china, the plates she'd inherited from her mother. If this was his last meal, it would be served properly. Dinner unfolded in excruciating tension. Bob was hyper-aware of the wire against his chest, the camera in his button, the watch on his wrist. Every word was being recorded, every gesture captured. "How was your day?" Bob asked, cutting his roast. "Productive?" Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Tied up loose ends, made final arrangements." Danny's fork clattered against his plate. Bob pressed on. "Danny, you seem quiet. Everything all right?" "Just tired, didn't sleep well." "Neither did I, actually." Bob took a sip of water. "Kept thinking about family, about choices we make, how one decision can change everything." Victoria's eyes sharpened. "That's very philosophical for a Tuesday night. When you get to be my age, you think about these things." Bob set down his fork, looked directly at Danny. "Son, I want you to know something. Whatever trouble you're in, whatever mistakes you've made, we can fix it together, father and son, like we always have." Danny's eyes filled with tears. "Dad." "Bob, that's very sweet," Victoria interrupted smoothly. "But Danny's handling his affairs just fine. Aren't you, honey?" "Yeah," Danny's voice cracked. "Just fine." Bob made his move. "Actually, I've been thinking. That monthly $700 isn't enough. I want to increase it to $1,500. And Danny, those debts you mentioned, let's pay them off together. I've got savings. What's money for if not helping family?" Victoria's mask slipped for just a second, a flash of cold fury before the smile returned. "That's incredibly generous, but we couldn't possibly—" "I insist. Tomorrow morning we'll go to the bank. I'll write a check for $20,000. That'll make a real dent, won't it?" This was the test. If this was truly about money they could access legitimately, Victoria would pivot, take the offer, change plans. But she needed him dead, needed total control of Danny, total access to the estate, total elimination of the witness. "Let's discuss it after dinner," Victoria said. "Bob, you've already done so much. We need to think about what's best for everyone." Translation: the plan doesn't change. Bob glanced at his watch, 6:47 p.m. In his earpiece, hidden, barely visible, Porter's voice whispered, "We heard that. She rejected the financial solution. That establishes intent. When you're ready, go to the basement." Bob stood from the table. "I'm going to head down to the workshop, finish that project I've been working on." Victoria's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Of course, you take your time." As Bob descended the basement stairs, he heard their whispered argument above. Danny: "Vicky, we can take the $20,000, pay off Rizzo, disappear." Victoria: "And live on what? Your non-existent job prospects? Don't be stupid. We stick to the plan." "I can't do this. He's my father." "Then you die. Is that what you want? Your father dies or you do. Choose." Bob positioned himself near his workbench, back to the stairs, apparently focused on a circuit board. His heart hammered against his ribs, against the wire taped to his chest. Footsteps on the stairs. Danny descended slowly, each step heavy with dread. "Hey, Dad, what are you working on?" Bob turned, looked at his son, really looked at him. Danny's face was pale, eyes red-rimmed, hands shaking. "Sit down, Danny. We need to talk." "Dad, I don't think—" "The cameras. I fixed them 10 days ago. Friday night, I forgot to mention it. But they've been recording. Everything." The color drained from Danny's face. "What?" "I know about the plan. Tuesday night, 9 p.m., basement stairs. I know about Victoria's previous identities. I know about the fake debt. And Danny—" Bob's voice broke. "I know you had a choice." Danny collapsed against the workbench, head in his hands. "Oh, God. Oh, God, Dad, I'm so sorry. I was scared. I was trapped. She said it was the only way." "There's always another way." Footsteps at the top of the stairs. Bob hadn't heard Victoria approach. "Well," her voice was completely different now, flat, cold, nothing like the warm daughter-in-law he'd known. "This complicates things." She descended with a crowbar in her hands. In his earpiece, Porter: "Stand by. Stand by. Vicky, stop! Danny jumped between them. Dad, run! Victoria swung the crowbar, not at Bob, but at Danny, metal connected with his shoulder. Danny screamed, crumpled. Bob pressed the panic button. Victoria's true nature emerged fully. No more masks, no more pretense. Her face transformed into something reptilian, predatory. You weak, pathetic child. I've done this 12 times. 12. And you're the most spineless partner I've ever had. She advanced on Bob, crowbar raised. Harold Pemberton begged me to stop. Gerald Thompson cried like a baby, but they all died and I walked away clean. You're just another name on a very long list. Upstairs, glass shattered. Heavy footsteps thundered through the house. Cleveland police, freeze! Victoria's eyes went wild. She didn't run for the front door. Instead, she sprinted for the basement window, small and high but accessible. With impossible agility, she grabbed the frame, hoisted herself through in one fluid motion. Military training. Had to be. SWAT poured down the basement stairs. Porter knelt beside Danny, checking his injury. Get EMTs in here. Bob pushed past them, grabbed his flashlight, followed Victoria through the window into the October night. Behind him, Porter shouted, Bob, stay inside, she's dangerous! But Bob was already running. The woods behind Bob's neighborhood sprawled dark and tangled. Bob knew every path, 30 years of living here, walking these trails when he couldn't sleep, when grief was too much, when he needed to feel Margaret's presence in the quiet. Victoria was fast, but Bob knew the terrain. He tracked her by sound, branches breaking, leaves crunching. She was heading for the old railway bridge, the one that crossed the ravine to the industrial district beyond. If she made it across, she could disappear into Cleveland's warren of abandoned buildings and be gone forever. Bob took the shortcut, the one only locals knew, cutting through Mrs. Patterson's property and emerging on the bridge's west side. Victoria skidded to a halt, seeing him block her path. Behind her, flashlights bobbed through trees, police closing in. Victoria, Bob called, his breath ragged. It's over. She laughed, hands raised but relaxed, like this was all a game. You think you've won? I've been caught before, Bob, 3 times. I always get out. You know why? Because prisons can't hold someone they don't understand. Police emerged from the woods. Porter, Rodriguez, a dozen uniforms, guns drawn. Hands on your head, Rodriguez commanded. Do it now. Victoria complied slowly, smirking. You want to know who I really am? My name is Lieutenant Vivian Shaw, dishonorably discharged from Army Intelligence, psychological operations specialist. I was trained to infiltrate, manipulate, and eliminate targets without leaving evidence. You think 12 dead old men is impressive? Try 32 confirmed kills across 15 years. 12 were just retirement hobbies. Bob felt his blood turn to ice. Harold Pemberton? Easy. Gerald Thompson? Easier. They were lonely, desperate for connection, willing to believe anything. She looked at Bob with something like respect. You, though, you're tougher than you look, smarter. In another life, I might have actually liked you. Porter approached with handcuffs. Vivian Shaw, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, elder fraud, and outstanding warrants in connection with multiple homicides across 4 states. As they cuffed her, Vivian leaned close to Bob, whispered, Your son's debt is real now. My brother Tommy will collect even while I'm in prison. Danny's marked, and there's nothing you can do to save him. She smiled as they led her away. Even captured, she'd engineered Danny's destruction. This wasn't over. Cleveland Metro Hospital, midnight. Danny lay in a bed, shoulder in a cast, face pale. Porter and Sarah stood nearby. Bob sat in the chair beside his son, exhausted, still wearing the wire. She contacted me 2 years ago, Danny said, his voice hollow. At the casino, like you thought. But it wasn't random. She showed me photos. A view of the house, said she'd been researching investment opportunities. She got me gambling. Introduced me to Tommy Brennan. Within 6 months, I owed $63,000. Then she offered a solution. Marry her, she'd help handle things. I didn't know she meant murder until 2 months ago. By then, Tommy threatened to kill me if I didn't cooperate. Danny's voice broke. I should have told you, should have gone to police. But I was scared. and she made it seem inevitable. Bob reached for Danny's uninjured hand. You had choices every single day. You chose wrong. I know. Tears tracked down Danny's face. I chose to let you die instead of facing my problems. That's on me. Sarah laid out the reality. Danny's cooperation counts. Testimony against Vivian, against Brennan, against the network. But you're guilty of conspiracy. 5 to 8 years, likely. Danny nodded slowly. I deserve it. Bob squeezed his son's hand. I'll wait for you. When you get out, we rebuild, but you do the work, therapy, addiction treatment, everything. You become the man I raised. I will, Dad, I swear. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was hope. 3 months later, Vivian Shaw's trial dominated national news. FBI uncovered 32 victims across 15 years, 6 states. She received life without parole, multiple consecutive sentences. Thomas Brennan and 6 others arrested. The network dismantled. Danny serving his sentence at Mansfield Correctional. Bob visited monthly, watching his son slowly piece himself back together. Bob's house felt different now, still home, but changed. He'd upgraded the security system again, taught neighborhood seniors about elder fraud, started consulting with Cleveland PD's Elder Crimes Unit. Mrs. Hughes organized weekly coffee meetings. They called themselves the Survivors Club, seniors who refused to be victims. Then, 4 months after Vivian's sentencing, a letter arrived. No return address, postmarked from federal prison. Bob opened it with steady hands. Dear Bob, congratulations, you won this round. Enjoy your son's prison visits, your neighborhood watch meetings, your little security upgrades. But here's what you need to understand. I'm not unique. There are others like me. We're a network within networks. Some are already in your city, watching, learning, choosing their next targets. We're patient, we're trained, and we're everywhere. One day, maybe years from now, you'll let your guard down. Or maybe we'll choose someone you care about. Eleanor next door seems lonely. Sarah Mitchell works late often. Even Danny, once he's released, well, prison makes people vulnerable to the right kind of attention. Sleep well, Bob. We'll be watching. V. Bob read it twice, then carried it to his workshop. He held it over a metal trash can, lit it with a match, watched the paper curl and burn. But he didn't throw away the ashes. Instead, he photographed them, emailed them to Porter with the subject line, "She's still threatening. There are others." Then Bob sat at his monitoring station, pulled up the security feeds, and began a systematic review of his neighborhood. Every unfamiliar car, every new face, every pattern that didn't fit. Vivian was right about one thing. There were probably others, but she was wrong about the most important thing. Bob Hayes wasn't going to let his guard down ever again. And if they came, whether for him, for Eleanor, for anyone in his neighborhood, they'd find something they didn't expect. An old man who'd learned that survival wasn't about being the strongest or fastest or youngest. It was about being prepared, connected, relentless. Bob checked his watch, 11:47 p.m. Somewhere out there, predators were hunting. But tonight, and every night after, Bob would be watching back. The camera never forgot, and neither would he.